Warning: the following video contains explicit language which may be offensive to some viewers or inappropriate for children. The content within this video is intended for mature audiences only.
Hello and welcome to this part 3 for season 1, episode 10, the finale of season 1 of Rabbits. The Future We Deserve is the title, and I hope everyone's doing well, having fun, toils and tribulations to a minimum. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
The day that Yumiko was spotted at the Canadian border crossing. The time matched perfectly. If she'd driven directly from the border to the ferry terminal, she would have made it just in time to catch that ferry to Galliano Island.
And yeah, it's one of those things where, as I said in the last video I did, things are starting to fall in together rapidly.
Galliano Island is one of the southern Gulf Islands between Vancouver and Vancouver Island. It's about a 45-minute ferry ride from Vancouver. It didn't take long to narrow down the area on Galliano most likely to house the well-known producer. There were at least a dozen really upscale residences around the southeast end of the island. They were a long distance apart, but it looked like we'd have time to check them all. I sat down with Jones to make plans.
And that was probably the right thing to do, the prudent thing to do. But were they wasting time by pausing? We don't know. Or not yet.
Try and figure out what to do next. We went back over everything we've been able to learn so far. We decided whatever happened to Yumiko must have happened up in Canada. The next morning, we'd load up my car and drive across the border to Vancouver. Jones told me that he believed we were running out of time.
Which, it's a very good possibility.
That night, I had the dream of the beach and the elevator. Jones told me later that he'd had the dream as well. He was looking haggard, worried. I imagined he was looking at me and thinking the exact same thing.
I imagine when you're fitting in these final pieces to the puzzle that sleep is probably fairly elusive at this point.
It felt like whatever was happening, we were getting close to the end.
Okay. I hate it when it does that. I'm going to stop the recording here. Then once I figure out why it locked up, we'll come back and hopefully it won't take too long. Okay, we're back. Let's see how this played out.
Whatever was happening,
okay, it's working.
We were getting close to the end. There was a long line at the border. It took us hours to get through. We hit rush hour in Vancouver, which was terrible. And then, finally, we missed the 5:30 ferry. The next ferry didn't leave until 8:25 p.m. Jones bought us some food and something to drink. By the time we made it to Galliano Island, it was dark.
Yeah, getting out to that island I mean, we just had a kitty cameo, but, cats are going to cat. But them getting out to their island gets it's rather important at this point.
Something started happening on the ferry. I began seeing shapes, dark shapes over the water, and I began feeling a sense of disconnectedness that was increasing the closer we got to the island. Jones told me that he was experiencing something similar. He was worried that if we didn't hurry up and do whatever it was we needed to do, that we were going to slip away.
See, now when he says they're going to slip away, does he mean they're going to jump tracks and wind up in a different reality? Or are they just going to lose Yumiko totally?
That something terrible and final was about to happen. The wind was blowing across the ocean. I looked across at the lights of Galliano Island in the distance. Whatever was going to happen, it was going to happen soon.
And since how we are running out of time and they're running out of time, it's going to happen. And it's going to be crazy when it happens.
I received a text message from Nick as soon as we got off the ferry. He told me that he'd emailed information on the recording that I'd sent him of Yumiko and that other man. But there was no service. I received the SMS message, but I was unable to access the email. Jones had the same problem.
Now, is that forces of the game interacting with the players, or was it just simply a phone malfunction or a drop in service?
We arrived at a locked gate. There was no nighttime access to the private road, so we had to park the car and walk about a quarter of a mile to a private beach. By the time we made it to the part of the island with the handful of large helipad-equipped mansions, our eyes had adjusted and we could see our feet ahead of us as we walked. The moon was bright.
I remember when we were kids, we visited my mom's family in Seattle proper, and even as far south as Seattle, in relationship to Canada, the when you have a gibbous moon or a full moon, or even a quarter moon getting ready to convert into a gibbous moon, you have some phenomenally beautiful night times.
And the sound of the sea was deceptively soothing as we made our way along the rocky beach. There were 5 or 6 homes that accessed this particular beach. We checked them all. 3 of them appeared to be vacant, and one was the residence of a local woodworker who'd been watching television alone in his living room when we knocked and interrupted his evening. He slammed the door in our faces.
Yeah, I think if I was in that woodworker's position and 2 people showed up like that in the middle of the, or early evening, early night, I think I would have probably done the same thing.
Wasn't in the mood to tell us about any of the other residents of the island. We turned back toward the beach, and that's when we saw them. They were walking along the shore toward us. At least a dozen figures, all dressed in gray.
Still, you have to be wondering, who these people in gray really are.
Jones grabbed my arm, and we started to run. The figures, although clearly walking while we ran, never lost any ground. It was strange.
Almost supernatural, one would say.
They were continually behind us. I had the feeling that we weren't going to lose them. Not this time. We ran up the beach until we came to the next house. We continued to run up and around the side of the house, the figures in gray in steady pursuit. The side of the house that wasn't on the beach was in the middle of a cul-de-sac. We had entered a residential area. We stopped running and just walked quickly. The figures in gray appeared to maintain their distance, or perhaps they were gaining a little with each step.
Now, were they trying to catch him? Trying to catch Carly and Jones? Or are they just herding them to go where they need them to go?
That's when I received an alert. That email from Nick had come through. The message was about the recording. Apparently, the voice on that recording belonged to an architect named Arthur Light.
Separating biology and the behavioral sciences from architecture is a fatal mistake.
I knew that name. He was a famous mid-century architect, one of the fathers of the West Coast modern movement. Jones and I slowed down again. The figures in gray continued to match our movements. It was terrifying. I couldn't stop looking back.
This whole thing being followed by people, no matter what speed you're moving, that appear never to gain any ground, but not to appear, they also appear not to have lost any ground. Yeah, that would be troubling. It'd be real troubling for me.
I knew that they were eventually going to catch up, somehow. I just didn't know when.
Or why.
We continued to move along the residential street toward another cul-de-sac directly in front of us. As we moved through the second well-lit area, the street lights started to switch off behind us, one by one.
And that kind of reminds me, and I don't know why it does, but in the first Harry Potter movie, when Dumbledore has the thing and he's sucking all the lights out of the light poles, that's kind of what it reminds me of. Don't know, like I said, I don't know why, but that's what it does. That's the image that pops into the brain.
It was weird, surreal. As we passed each light, it went dark. In the darkness, I knew that the figures in gray were there, slowly, getting closer, and that it wouldn't be long before they reached us. It wouldn't be long now before something terrible and final happened.
The thing is, she says something terrible happening. Now, it depends on your point of view. From a certain point of view, it might be terrible, but from another certain point of view, it might be a good thing. You never know.
Now that my phone had service, I did a quick search for Arthur Light. It turns out he'd designed numerous homes in British Columbia, Canada, including the only house he ever built for himself. A house that was recently purchased by a well-known reclusive Hollywood producer. A house located right here on Galliano Island. The house wasn't far from where we were, just down at the end of the next beach. I grabbed Jones again and pulled him forward. There was no way I was going to let them catch up before we made it to that house.
And then again, it begs the question, are they trying to catch you, or are they trying to herd you to the house? We'll find out.
To Arthur Light's house. The lighthouse. We continue to move quickly along the rocky beach, staying just ahead of the figures in gray.
I remember the first time I listened through this, the whole connection of the Arthur lighthouse, I thought that was just brilliant. Just, especially within the context of the Rabbits universe. I thought that was just a really cool play on the words.
As we moved closer to a seemingly endless set of wooden stairs winding up the side of a steep rock face, we could hear voices from the house at the end of those stairs. We ran up the first set of steps leading up to the modernist house on the hill. The first set of 68 steps was followed, of course, by a second set of 78.
There we go, 6878.
By the time we reached the house at the top of that rocky hill, we were both panting and barely able to stand. The figures in gray were right behind us, and at this point, there appeared to be hundreds of them. We turned and ran into the house. As we moved into the house, time seemed to slow. There were 100 or so guests, maybe more.
I think this would be a good place to call this video. So when we hit the actual climax of the story and the fourth part of this, we don't have to worry about breaking it up, and we can just sail through it and finish season 1. So until next time, peace.